Grant Mercer's silver pen rolls across the permit hearing table and stops against the mud packed into the seam of my work boot. He pushes a yellow legal pad after it. "Take notes," he says without looking at me. The microphone catches every soft scrape of paper. 5 members of the Alder County Environmental Review Panel sit under the county seal, sorting exhibits into neat stacks. Behind us, the hearing room smells like wet wool and overheated wiring. Grant leans toward the microphone. "For the record, I'm Grant Mercer, the new Vice President of Operations for Mercer Soil and Stone. This is Elena Mercer, my junior assistant." My sister Paige sits 2 chairs away. Her fingers tighten around the silver clasp of her briefcase, but she doesn't correct her husband. 6 weeks ago, my name was printed on the technical witness list. Now it has disappeared from Grant's presentation, along with 37 field photographs I took after the east containment berm began to fail. I pick up his pen. The panel chair watches me write the date at the top of the pad. Her clerk has a folder open beside her laptop. I can read the file name on the tab from across the room. MSS_raw_field_images. Grant hasn't seen it yet. 6 weeks earlier, Luis Herrera and I stood in ankle-deep mud at 5:42 in the morning, watching the east berm move. Not dramatically. Dirt rarely announced itself before causing trouble. It shifted by fractions, settled where it should have held, and made the kind of soft, sucking noise most people mistook for rainwater finding a low spot. Luis shined his flashlight across the slope. "Tell me that post was leaning yesterday." "It wasn't." "Tell me I'm remembering wrong." "You're remembering wrong." He gave me a hopeful look. "It was 2 inches left of that paint mark," I said. "Your bedside manner is terrible." "I work with dirt. Dirt has feelings. Not after what you do to it with a loader." He looked back at the berm. The joke left his face. Mercer Soil and Stone took in leaves, brush, clean wood waste, and food processing residuals, then turned them into compost blends, engineered topsoil, and erosion control material. On a dry summer afternoon, the Alder Creek yard smelled like cedar mulch and hot dust. After 3 days of November rain, it smelled like coffee grounds left in a sealed car. The east berm held back the lower leachate pond, a dark rectangular basin where runoff collected before being pumped through the treatment system. The water was supposed to sit 3 feet below the top. That morning, my folding survey rod showed 19 inches. I photographed the reading, the pond surface, and the leaning reference post. Then I stepped backward until the whole slope fit in the frame. My camera added the time, date, and coordinates automatically. A corner of my orange waterproof notebook appeared at the bottom of the picture. Louise crouched near the toe of the berm and pressed 2 fingers into a wet patch. "Seep," he said. "Maybe. Maybe means yes when you say it like that." I took another picture and uncapped the blue grease pencil clipped to my vest. On a strip of white survey tape, I marked the edge of the stain and wrote 0551. The main pump kicked on with a heavy mechanical hum. Water trembled inside the pond, but the level didn't drop. Luis glanced toward the pump shed. "That doesn't sound right." It coughed twice and stopped. A red alarm lamp began blinking above the shed door. Luis pulled out his radio. "I'll get Ray. Have him bring the backup online." His thumb hovered over the button. "Backup through a fault yesterday." That was the first thing he said that morning without looking at me. I lowered my camera. "Yesterday when?" "Around 4. "Why isn't it in the shift log?" I told Curtis. Curtis Wynn had been yard supervisor for 12 days. Before that, he ran dispatch at our larger facility south of Dayton. Grant had brought him in after reducing 3 management positions to 1 and called the promotion an efficiency decision. Curtis was fast, agreeable, and skilled at producing whichever number had most recently been requested. "What did Curtis say?" I asked. Luis dragged one muddy glove over his mouth. He said Grant already knew. The radio on my shoulder crackled. "Elena, you at the East Pond?" Curtis asked. I looked at Luis. He lifted both hands, absolving himself. I am. Grant wants you in the main office at 7. The freeboard is under 20 inches. The reference post has shifted and both pumps are offline. A pause. Rain ticked against my hard hat. Are you calling that an emergency? Curtis asked. I'm telling you what I measured. Because if you're calling an emergency, I need you to say emergency. And if I don't use the word, you don't have to start the response clock? Luis studied a fascinating patch of mud near his boots. Curtis's voice hardened. I asked a simple question. Yes, I'm calling it an emergency. The radio went quiet. Luis exhaled. There goes breakfast. Get Ray. You know Grant's going to say you're dramatic. Then he can say it while the rental pump is running. I documented the alarm panel, the wet toe, and 3 shallow cracks along the access road. The cracks looked harmless unless you knew where to look. Parallel lines meant surface drying. Curved lines tracking the pond edge meant the loaded soil was beginning to settle outward. My father had taught me that. Before he taught me how to drive a haul truck, he had also taught me to use waterproof notebooks after losing 6 hours of measurements to a thunderstorm in a shirt pocket with bad drainage. Every new one began the same way. On the inside cover, in his narrow carpenter's handwriting, he wrote, "Write what the ground says." He'd been dead for 2 years. I still used the last box he ordered. At 6:18, Ray arrived with 2 mechanics. They opened the backup control cabinet and found the fault light disabled with a square of black electrical tape. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Ray peeled off the tape and stuck it to his glove. Could have fallen there, Luis said. From where? I asked. The electrical tape tree. Ray snorted despite himself. I photographed the cabinet. By 6:40, a vacuum truck had begun lowering the pond. Luis pulled material away from the berm in careful passes, while Ray called every pump rental company within 50 miles. I sent my initial incident report to Curtis, our outside civil engineer, and the environmental compliance mailbox. That last address went to me, Curtis, Grant, and Paige. At 6:57, Grant replied, "Hold distribution pending operational review." At 6:58, Paige sent a separate message. "Mom wants everyone calm. Please come in before this turns into a family thing." The main office had once been a farmhouse, though years of additions had left it looking like 3 different buildings arguing over the same roof. Muddy boots lined the back entrance beneath a sign that said, "Remove or be removed." My father had painted the sign after my mother threatened to make him mop his own footprints. Nobody had taken it down. Grant was in the conference room with Paige and Curtis. He had removed his jacket and rolled his white shirt sleeves to exactly the same height on both arms. A site plan covered the table. Red and blue magnets marked equipment locations, hauling routes, and the proposed expansion pad. Grant understood operations. That was what made him dangerous when he decided reality was negotiable. Before joining the family company, he had managed distressed manufacturing plants for a regional lender. He could walk into a yard, watch it for 10 minutes, and find the loader wasting fuel or the truck route adding 6 unnecessary turns. At our Dayton facility, he changed the tipping schedule, renegotiated diesel deliveries, and turned a monthly loss into a narrow profit without laying off the scalehouse staff. My mother called him decisive. My father had called him a man who sharpened both sides of the knife. "Elena," Grant said. "Sit. I'm wet. The chairs are vinyl." I meant I'm staying 5 minutes. The pond response is active. He looked at the mud on my pants, then at Paige. She moved a stack of refinancing papers out of range of me. Curtis closed the conference room door. Grant tapped my incident report. "You distributed this before operational review." "I distributed it to the people listed in the response plan. You called a pump fault and elevated water an emergency. I called a slumping berm, a failed primary pump, a disabled backup alarm, and 19 inches of freeboard an emergency." Curtis shifted in his chair. "The alarm wasn't disabled. Tape got over the indicator." "Of course," I said. "Migratory tape. Paige made a sound that could have been a cough. Grant didn't smile. The pond didn't overtop. We responded before it could, which is the system working. The system is the pumps. Luis and a vacuum truck are improvising because the system failed. Grant turned the site plan toward me. The proposed expansion was shaded pale green, 12 more acres of receiving bays, curing rows, and a second-lined pond. It would nearly double our annual capacity. The permit hearing was 6 weeks away. The lender's environmental review begins Monday, he said. If we create a record suggesting containment failure, they freeze the refinancing. If the refinancing freezes, the expansion stalls. If the expansion stalls, we lose the municipal contracts Paige spent 9 months negotiating. I didn't create the record. You chose the classification. The conditions chose it. He leaned back and studied me as if I were an interesting defect in a machine. Paige opened the financial packet. The company has enough cash for 11 weeks at current obligations, 14 if we delay replacing the south grinder. We're not asking you to hide a spill. We don't know whether there was a release yet. There wasn't, Curtis said. I looked at him. Did you sample the swale? He blinked. That's what I thought. Grant folded his hands. We need precise language. Emergency is not precise. It's defined in our response plan. I've read the plan, then you know it's precise. Paige said my name softly, the way she had when we were younger, and our mother was in the next room. Grant slid a clean copy of my report across the table. Several phrases had been changed. Containment concern had become maintenance observation. Suspected seepage had become surface moisture. Backup alarm disabled had become indicator partially obscured. At the bottom, my signature line waited. We're describing a temporary maintenance variance, he said. The civil engineer will inspect this afternoon. If he identifies a structural issue, we'll address it. He can't inspect the conditions I saw after you pumped the pond down and dressed the slope. He can inspect the berm, after it's been altered, after it's been stabilized. Curtis nodded as if Grant had corrected a spelling error. I read the revised report again. It was polished, calm, and technically defensible if each sentence stood alone. Together, the sentences told a story that had not happened. What about the swale? I asked. Curtis said, normal stormwater discoloration from the mulch piles. You haven't sampled it. We know the site. So do I. Grant's patience thinned by one visible degree. Your role is to document field conditions, Elena. Mine is to determine operational significance. My certification is on the inspection, and this family's payroll is on my desk. Paige flinched. Grant noticed and softened his tone. There are 46 people depending on us to be adults about this, he said. Drivers with mortgages, operators who stayed when other yards offered more. We can fix a pump without handing the lender a reason to choke us. He was not wrong about the people. That was the worst of it. I knew whose pickup needed a new transmission and who was covering a spouse's medical deductible. At Mercer Soil and Stone, financial pressure had names, work gloves, and lunch containers in the break room refrigerator. I picked up the report. Paige's shoulders loosened. Then I uncapped Grant's pen, drew a line through my signature block, and wrote, Revision does not reflect observed conditions. See original field record and photographs. Curtis stared at the page. Grant looked at my orange notebook tucked under my arm. His expression did not change, but something in the room did. Until then he had thought I was upset, difficult maybe, sentimental about procedure. Now he understood I was resisting him. He took the report from me with 2 fingers. All right, he said. From now on, every record you produce comes through operational review before it leaves this property. The response plan requires direct distribution. I'll revise the response plan. You can't revise what happened this morning. Grant glanced at Paige before answering. No, he said, but I can decide who gets to explain it. By noon, the rain had weakened to a mist, and Curtis had found 2 operators with shovels, a skid steer, and instructions to make the east berm look respectable. They were spreading dry crushed stone over the access road when Dana Klein arrived. Dana was the civil engineer whose stamp appeared on the pond design. She was compact, gray-haired, and habitually dressed as if every site visit might turn into a deposition. Even her rain jacket had sharp creases. She parked beside the pump shed and watched the skid steer smooth the last visible crack. "Efficient," she said. Curtis missed the insult. We got on top of it. Dana looked toward the pond. The vacuum truck had lowered the water by almost 3 feet. A rented diesel pump thudded on the gravel pad, its hose vibrating every time it took a breath. "What failed?" she asked. "The primary pump tripped," Curtis said. Backup indicator was partially obscured. Obscured by what? Debris. I was standing 10 feet away with my camera. Dana glanced at me. "What kind of debris?" "Electrical tape," I said. Curtis made a small chopping motion at his thigh, like he thought I came with a mute button. Dana walked the toe of the berm. The seep had faded to a damp stain, but my survey tape remained where I'd tied it to a clump of switchgrass. The grease pencil mark sat 6 inches inside the wet soil. "You mark this?" she asked. "At 5:51. "What was the pond elevation?" I told her. Curtis stepped between us. Grant asked that all technical questions come through operations. Dana looked down at his boots, then up at his face. "Are you operations?" "I'm the yard supervisor." "Good, go find me the pump maintenance records. I can have them emailed." "I'd like to see the paper log." Curtis gave me a look before heading toward the office. It promised that whatever happened next would be entered into an account with my name on it. Dana waited until he was out of earshot. "I received your first report," she said. "Before Grant's hold?" 3 minutes before. The photos were compressed in the email. I need the original files. "They're on the compliance drive." "Still?" That question landed harder than it should have. "I assume so." Dana's expression suggested assumptions belonged in buildings designed by other engineers. She pulled a business card from her pocket and wrote a secure portal address on the back. "Upload the native files under our existing services agreement. Include the camera index and your field pages. My notebook stays with me." "Good answer. Scan the relevant pages." "You think the berm moved?" "I think somebody resurfaced the access road before I arrived." The rented pump gave a hard, metallic knock. We both looked toward it. Dana tucked her pen away. "I also think your family is about to spend a great deal of money proving dirt has feelings." Luis had told her the joke. I could hear him laughing from inside the loader cab. At 1:20, I scanned 6 pages from my orange notebook. At 1:31, I uploaded the native photographs, including the image of the taped alarm light, to Dana's portal. The upload confirmation went automatically to the company compliance mailbox. At 1:36, Grant called me. I let it ring once before answering. "Where are you?" "Sampling the swale." "I gave you a direct instruction. You said records had to go through operational review before leaving the property. Dana's portal is part of our contracted compliance archive." "Don't play language games with me. That's an interesting request from you." He breathed through his nose. "You're done at the swale. Bring the samples to the office. They need to be iced and delivered within the holding time. Then Curtis will deliver them." Curtis told Dana electrical tape was debris. "Elena, there was a particular warning in the way family members use my full name. It meant they were about to punish me while claiming intimacy." "The chain of custody form is already signed," I said. "Nia is meeting me at the gate." Nia Brooks worked for the independent lab we used for quarterly storm water testing. She could make removing a sample bottle from a cooler feel like a surgical procedure. She checked seals, times, temperatures, and signatures with the patience of someone who expected everyone else to become less trustworthy under pressure. Grant knew that. "You called the lab without authorization." "Our standing order covers event sampling. This is not a reportable event. That's what the sample will help determine." Silence. Then he said, "Give the cooler to Nia. Come to my office." I watched Nia's white van turn through the gate. "After she signs for it." He hung up. Nia parked beside my truck and lowered the window. "You look popular." "I'm considering a career where nobody owns a phone." "Monastery? Do they test runoff?" "Only spiritually." She stepped out, put on clean gloves, and opened the cooler. I watched her verify the seals and compare the bottle labels to my form. "Was there visible flow?" she asked. "Intermittent. Brown discoloration, slight organic odor. Photographed? Yes. Upstream control? In the second cooler." She nodded once. That was Nia's version of warmth. When she signed the transfer line, my shoulders loosened. A golf cart came buzzing down the service road. Curtis drove it too fast through a puddle and splashed muddy water across his own door. "Grant wants her in the office," he called. Nia did not look up. Grant doesn't control my chain of custody. "I'm talking to Elena." "I know," I enjoyed answering. Curtis parked badly and waited while Nia locked both coolers in her van. Back at the farmhouse, my access card no longer opened the conference room door. The office administrator, Gloria, had to let me in. She was 60, if she was a day, wore purple reading glasses on a beaded chain, and knew where every embarrassing document in the company had been filed since 1998. "Card trouble?" she asked. "Apparently." She tapped hers against the reader. "Technology senses evil." Grant sat at the table with Paige. The revised response plan was open between them. He had not wasted the 40 minutes since our call. "Effective immediately," he said. "Curtis is the designated incident coordinator for Alder Creek. Field staff report observations to him. External communications require executive approval. You can't retroactively root the record. We're discussing future conduct." Paige turned a copy toward me. She had added a note in the margin beside the lender notification section. Her handwriting slanted harder than usual. "Dana estimates repairs between 90 and 140,000, she said. "More if the liner's affected. Then we should find out whether it is. We are finding out. By covering the cracks?" Grant's palm came down flat on the table. Not a slam. He had better control than that. "Enough." Gloria was still standing by the door. Grant looked at her. "You can go." She adjusted her purple glasses. "She can't get out without my card." "Leave the door open." "That defeats the security system." "Gloria." She held up both hands and propped the door with a rubber wedge shaped like a wedge of cheese. My father had bought it at a hardware convention. Grant stared at it as though the cheese itself had chosen a side. Paige waited until Gloria left. "The bank moved the review call to Thursday," she said. "They heard there was an emergency response." "From who?" "The vacuum truck company posts dispatches in the regional contractor system. Our lender's consultant monitors it." Grant's eyes stayed on me. This is what I was trying to avoid. The pump failed whether I used the word or not. The bank didn't know that at 6 this morning. So the plan was to repair it before they found out? The plan was to respond proportionately. Paige rubbed the ridge between her eyebrows. She had done that during tax season since she joined the company, long before Grant came along. "We have 11 weeks, she said. "Do you understand what that means?" "Yes." "Then why do you sound like you're winning an argument?" That hurt because it was close enough to something I feared about myself. I had spent years being correct in rooms where correct was treated as a personality flaw. Sometimes I sharpened it before anyone could use the dull side against me. "I don't feel like I'm winning," I said. Grant pushed the new response plan closer. "Sign that you received the procedural change. I'll sign receipt. I won't sign agreement. You're an employee, not a separate government. I'm also the credentialed inspector whose name is on the quarterly certification." "We can change that." Paige looked up. "Grant." He didn't take it back. I signed the receipt and wrote the time beside my name. The next morning, my assigned pickup was gone. Curtis said fleet utilization had been reevaluated. He offered me the Scale House golf cart, which had a top speed of 13 miles per hour, and a plastic side curtain held shut with binder clips. "The north outfall is 1.5 miles away," I said. "Good weather for a ride." "It's 38 degrees. Wear layers." Luis appeared behind him carrying a thermos. Golf cart's got a heater. Curtis frowned. Since when? Luis handed me the thermos. Since I made coffee. I took the cart. My inspection route changed too. Curtis removed the lower pond and east berm from my checklist because, according to his email, active repairs made them operational areas. He assigned those inspections to himself. At 7:12 each morning, he entered the same sentence into the digital log. No material change. Condition stable. At 7:20 from the gravel strip beside the permitted sampling point, I photographed the survey tape moving farther from the edge of the stain. The berm was still settling. Dana installed 3 monitoring pins along the crest. By Friday, the middle pin had shifted 11 millimeters. Grant approved excavation and reconstruction, but he described it to the lender as accelerated preventive maintenance. The lab results arrived that afternoon. The upstream control looked like ordinary stormwater. The swale sample showed elevated ammonia, conductivity, and organic loading, consistent with diluted leachate. Not proof of a release from the pond, Dana cautioned in her memo. Consistent with one. Grant circled that distinction in red and forwarded the memo to everyone. Evidence does not establish a permit exceedance, he wrote. Nia called me while I was eating crackers over the sink in the break room. Your boss is shopping for a different conclusion, she said. How? He asked whether yard debris could produce the same profile. Could it? Sure. If the yard debris had been soaking in concentrated compost leachate. I laughed before I could stop myself. Gloria glanced over from the copier. Good news? No. Sounded like good news. It was precise bad news. She nodded approvingly. Nia lowered her voice. He also requested amended narrative language. I declined. Thank you. Don't thank me. Pay invoice 714 on time. After we hung up, Gloria held out a warm sheet from the copier. It was the preliminary witness list for the expansion hearing. Grant Mercer, Vice President of Operations. Dana Klein, Project Engineer. Elena Mercer, Environmental Field Technician. My name sat there in black type, exactly where it belonged. Found it jammed behind the lender packet, Gloria said. Did Grant ask you to print this? He asked Paige. Paige asked me. I folded the page and slipped it into my notebook. That Sunday, my mother served pot roast at 6 and placed the gravy in front of Grant. Diane Mercer had chaired company meetings for 27 years without holding an operating title. She said titles made people lazy. What she had instead was the voting control my father left her and a way of asking questions that made dishonesty feel physically unclean. Paige sat beside Grant. I sat across from them. For 10 minutes, we discussed asphalt prices, a broken conveyor belt, and whether the dining room radiator had always clanked like a prisoner with a tin cup. Then Diane put down her fork. Did the pond leak? Grant answered first. The evidence doesn't establish a permit exceedance. She looked at him. I asked Elena. Paige's knife stopped against her plate. I said, something consistent with leachate reached the swale. We can't prove the exact path yet. Did it reach the creek? We found no indication that it did. My mother nodded. Can the berm be fixed? Yes. Can the hearing go forward? Grant said, absolutely. I said, not honestly on the current application. The radiator knocked 3 times. Paige stared at me. You know what delaying does. I know what lying about the site does. Grant isn't lying. He called structural movement preventive maintenance. It is preventive if we fix it before it fails. It already failed to perform as designed. Grant laid his napkin beside his plate. This is why Elena should not testify. The sentence was quiet, almost tired. My mother looked from him to me. She's on the witness list. Because her credential is on the inspection history. That doesn't mean she has the judgment to discuss operational significance. I reached into my notebook and unfolded Gloria's copy. Paige's face changed when she saw it. Where did you get that? Does it matter? Yes. To you or to Grant? Don't do that. Do what? Make every question sound like a trap. Grant took a sip of water. The list is preliminary. My mother picked up her fork again. Then make it final. Elena answers field questions. Dana answers engineering questions. You answer operations. For one startled second, Grant had no polished response ready. It was a small thing, my mother giving me one clean square of ground to stand on, but I felt it all the way down. Grant recovered. "All right," he said. "Then we prepare as one team." He smiled at me across my father's table. The following morning, a yellow legal pad was waiting on my desk with a note clipped to the top. Hearing prep. Conference room. 8 o'clock. Bring your field records. At 8 o'clock, Grant stood at the whiteboard with 3 phrases written in blue marker. Isolated equipment, fault preventive, stabilization, no off-site impact. Dana sat at the conference table with a coffee she had brought from somewhere else. Curtis had a binder open in front of him, but kept glancing at my orange notebook. Grant pointed to the first phrase. "These are the facts we need to communicate clearly. The panel doesn't need every internal detail of a maintenance response." Dana blew across her coffee. "They'll probably want the details relevant to the permit, which is why you're here. I'm here because my seal is on the pond plan, and you've concluded the liner wasn't compromised. I've concluded the testing we've done so far hasn't found evidence of liner damage." Grant capped the marker. "That's what I said." "No," Dana said. "It was what you wanted your sentence to imply." Curtis studied his binder with sudden devotion. Grant took a breath and turned to me. "Walk us through what you'll say if they ask about the morning of November 6th. I set the yellow legal pad on the table without opening it. I arrived at 5:42. The pond had 19 inches of freeboard. The east reference post had shifted. There was visible seepage at the toe, 3 curved cracks along the access road, and both pumps were unavailable. "The main pump was cycling," Curtis said. "It ran for less than a minute and stopped. So it was available. Do you describe a truck as available if it starts, rolls into traffic, and dies?" Dana covered a smile with her cup. Grant wrote reliability on the whiteboard. "Was there an overtopping?" "No." "Was there a confirmed discharge to Alder Creek?" "No." "Was there a confirmed permit exceedance?" "The swale sample was consistent with diluted leachate." "That wasn't my question." "It's the answer I'd give." He placed the marker in the tray with exaggerated care. Page entered carrying 2 banker's boxes. "Sorry." The lender wanted revised projections. Grant looked at his watch. "We've been waiting." I said I was sorry. It was a minor exchange, the kind married people could hide inside a business meeting. Page set the boxes down harder than necessary and took the seat farthest from him. Grant resumed. "Elena, this hearing is not a seminar. Answer what's asked. What if they ask whether the berm failed? You say it remained functional. It didn't maintain required freeboard. The pumps maintain freeboard. The pumps are part of the containment system." Dana said, "She's right." Grant ignored her. "The berm didn't breach. The pond didn't overtop. The creek wasn't affected. The system can fail before the worst possible outcome happens. Not in plain English. Especially in plain English." Page pulled a calculator from one of the boxes and began checking a page that did not appear to need checking. Grant walked to the windows. Outside, an excavator was removing the upper section of the east berm under Dana's repair plan. Each bucket exposed a darker layer of saturated soil. "The hearing is Thursday," he said. "The bank has extended the review deadline to Friday at noon. If the panel continues the application, the bank freezes the credit line. We missed 2 equipment payments in December. By January, we reduce hours." Dana looked at him. "You got them to extend?" "I got them to keep listening." That was Grant's particular competence. He could make a closing door pause half an inch from the frame, then convince everyone the pause was an entrance. He faced me again. "I'm asking you to be accurate without being theatrical." The word theatrical floated between us in its little costume. I opened my notebook to November 6th and turned it toward him. The handwriting was blocky from cold fingers. Times ran down the left margin. Measurements, equipment status, weather, photograph numbers, and calls filled the page. "Tell me which line is theatrical." He did not look down. Curtis reached for the notebook. I closed it before he touched it. Grant saw that too. "We'll take 10 minutes," he said. Dana left to make a call. Curtis disappeared toward the break room. Paige stayed in her chair until Grant asked her to bring him the lender's conditions from the front office. "They're in your email," she said. "I want the printed copy." She looked at him for a long second, then left. When the door closed, Grant sat across from me. "You think this is about your report," he said. "It is about my report. It's about authority. Yours, everyone's, your mother's, Paige's, mine. A company can't operate if one person gets to turn every disagreement into an external record. The record became external because Dana's our engineer and Nia's our lab. That's how the permit works. You know what I mean? I know you want compliance to be internal when it's inconvenient and independent when it gets us a permit." His mouth tightened. "You've wanted Paige to stand up to me since I took this job. I wanted her to stop apologizing for you before you'd done anything. And there it is. What? This isn't professional for you." I laughed once. "You introduced family first. You resent that she chose me. To run operations? To trust." He said it so calmly that I almost missed how practiced it was. Paige and I had been close in the way two women could be close, while wanting opposite things from the same family. She wanted permanence. I wanted clarity. After our father died, she stayed late with my mother, the insurance folders, and the lawyers. I stayed outside, where equipment still broke for understandable reasons. Grant had stepped into the space between those choices and translated each of us to the other. At first, it felt helpful. Later, I realized he was always the one carrying the message. "I don't need her to choose me," I said. "Then stop forcing her to." He slid the legal pad closer. "Write the questions you believe the panel may ask. We'll agree on precise answers. I'm not agreeing to a script. You'll prepare like everyone else. I'll prepare facts. Then you won't testify." There it was, delivered without heat. "My certification is in the application. We can submit your inspection records without presenting you as a witness." "You told my mother." I told Diane we'd prepare as one team. "I'm trying." I looked through the window at the excavator. A bucket rose from the berm, heavy with wet soil that should have been compacted and stable. "Continue the hearing," I said. "What?" "Ask for 30 days. Submit Dana's repair plan, disclose the sample results, and amend the expansion to phases. Approve the new receiving pad first. Hold the second pond and the western curing rows until monitoring confirms the repair." He stared at me. "The bank will freeze us. Paige can show them the municipal contracts tied to the first phase. Sell the south grinder if we have to. Lease one for peak weeks. That adds $9 a ton in processing cost. $7 if Luis moves screening to Tuesdays and Thursdays instead of daily." He knew I had done the math. That bothered him more than refusal. I continued. "We present a controlled correction instead of hoping nobody asks why a berm under active repair is described as stable. You've discussed this with Paige." "No." "Dana?" "No." "Then who?" "I work here, Grant." He stood. "Your plan protects your conscience by transferring risk to every other person in this company. My plan protects the permit. Your plan admits a failure that hasn't been established. You're rebuilding the berm. We're improving it. Then leave the cracked section in place." For a moment, anger broke through. Not loud anger. Something brighter and more honest. "You want to be vindicated," he said. "I want the application to match the site. You want a photograph of yourself being right." I thought of the red alarm lamp under its square of black tape. "No," I said. "I already have one." At lunch, Paige found me in the equipment bay cleaning mud from the legs of my survey rod. She shut the door behind her. "Did you propose a phased application?" "Yes." "To Grant alone?" I didn't know I needed a witness to make a suggestion. She leaned against a pallet of erosion control socks. He says you threatened to tell the panel the berm failed unless he delays. That isn't what I said. What did you say? I told her. She listened without interrupting, which made me realize how rarely she got the same courtesy at home. When I finished, she rubbed her thumb across the side of her wedding ring. The grinder sale doesn't cover enough, she said. We'd still have a cash gap. How much? $280,000 by February. What if the first municipal payment is advanced against delivery? They won't do it. You don't know until you ask. I did ask. This morning. I set the rag down. Paige looked toward the closed bay door. They'll advance 15% if we provide a performance bond. That gets you halfway. It gets us close. Close is negotiable. That's what Grant said when I told him. Then why won't he consider it? Because the lender told him a continuance counts as adverse permit action. They'll cut our borrowing base automatically, unless you renegotiate the condition. She gave me a tired smile. You sound like him. That was not praise, but it wasn't entirely an insult. Ask for the bank's environmental consultant to join a call with Dana, I said. Not just Grant and their credit officer. Let the people who understand the repair talk. And if they still say no, then at least the decision belongs to the actual facts. Paige's smile disappeared. You make facts sound like they don't belong to people. They belong to whoever has to live with them. Easy for you, you can leave. The words struck before either of us could pretend they were accidental. What does that mean? You have your credential. Dana would hire you tomorrow. I have Mom, the debt, the contracts, 46 W-2s, and a husband who thinks losing this permit means everyone finally sees he was never family. I never said he wasn't family. You never had to. A loader reverse alarm beeped beyond the wall. I folded the survey rod. What do you want from me? Her eyes shone, but her voice stayed level. I want 1 week where my sister isn't the thing my husband is most afraid of. She left before I could answer. That afternoon, Curtis issued me a written performance warning for bypassing operational review and using an external lab without supervisor authorization. Grant had signed beneath his name. Paige's signature line was blank. I wrote a response, attached the standing sampling order, the original response plan, and Dana's portal instructions, then signed acknowledgement. Gloria scanned the whole packet. Separate files, she asked. 1 file, in order. Bless you. She fed the pages through the scanner. Management's been asking about camera settings. What settings? Whether timestamps can be changed. I looked at her. They asked me because I bought the cameras, she said. I told them I also bought the staplers, but I'm not an expert in ballistics. Who asked? Curtis first, Grant later. The native image files drew their time from GPS whenever the camera had a signal. The coordinate log showed the synchronization status. Every photograph from November 6th carried it. Grant had noticed the timestamps. I called Dana from the parking lot. Do you still have the native files? Yes. Keep the portal receipt and the metadata report. I keep project records for 10 years. Grant's asking whether the camera time can be changed. Dana was quiet for half a second. Anything can be changed. The question is whether the change leaves evidence. Would it? In these files, yes. I leaned against the golf cart, relieved and ashamed of being relieved. Your notebook scans match the image sequence, she added. My server receipt predates the repair work. Stop sounding like one man gets to decide whether the morning occurred. On Wednesday, the revised witness list arrived. Grant Mercer, Vice President of Operations, Dana Klein, Project Engineer, Curtis Wynn, Yard Supervisor. My name appeared on the final page under Administrative Support. 3 of my photographs remained in the presentation: a clean western swale, the intact upper pond, and a wide shot of the east access road taken before the rain. My failure images were gone, but my inspection certification remained in the permit appendix. At 4:45, I put the list, the performance warning, and the presentation index inside my orange notebook. At 4:47, Paige emailed Dana, me, and the bank's environmental consultant. Please join a call regarding a phased permitting option. Grant canceled the call 12 minutes later. The next morning, he wore the navy suit Paige had bought him for lender meetings and carried the yellow legal pad under his arm. On the drive to the county building, he reviewed his testimony with Curtis from the front seat. I sat in back beside two bankers' boxes and my orange notebook. The east berm remained stable during the relevant inspection period, Grant said. Curtis nodded. Right. Preventive work began after Dana identified an area for improvement. Right. I looked out at the rain moving across Alder Creek. At the hearing table, Grant placed me behind and slightly to his left. Paige sat on his right. Dana took a seat near the aisle with her project file on her lap. Grant pushed his pen and the yellow pad toward me. I wrote the date. He called me his junior assistant. Then he took the oath and began turning November 6th into a morning that had never happened. I took notes exactly as instructed. At 10:14, he testified that no visible instability had been documented before Dana's inspection. At 10:19, he said the rental pump was brought in after the county requested additional precautions. At 10:26, he described the brown water in the swale as ordinary mulch, runoff, and said no field evidence suggested otherwise. Paige stopped looking at him. Chairwoman Cho waited until he finished. Then she opened the folder beside her laptop. Mr. Mercer, she said, I have several questions about the timestamps in your field photographs. Grant's hand moved toward the microphone. Those aren't my field photographs, he said. Chairwoman Cho adjusted her glasses. They were produced by your project engineer in response to our staff's request for supporting documentation. Dana opened her file but didn't speak. Grant glanced back at her. Our presentation contains the relevant site images. I'm looking at 40 images identified as the original files underlying the inspection certification in Appendix C. Cho turned to the clerk. Please display image 17. The lights dimmed. The east berm filled the screen behind the panel. My folding survey rod stood in the pond, its red and white markings sharp against the dark water. 19 inches of freeboard. In the lower corner, part of my orange notebook rested on the concrete edge. A timestamp ran across the bottom, November 6th, 5:47:12. Cho looked at Grant. You testified that no visible instability was documented before Ms. Klein's afternoon inspection. That image shows a water level reading, not instability. The clerk advanced to the next photograph. The leaning reference post appeared, with the old paint mark visible 2 inches to its right. Then the wet stain at the toe. Then the curved cracks. Then my survey tape marked 0551 in blue grease pencil. The images were clinical when I took them. On the hearing room wall, each one felt enormous and indecent, like a private argument being projected at a wedding. Grant leaned closer to his attorney, a local land use specialist who had spent most of the morning turning pages with increasing concern. She whispered something. He shook his head. Cho said, The embedded coordinates place these at the east containment pond? Dana lifted her microphone. Yes. And you received these files when? At 1:31 p.m. on November 6th. My server created an automatic receipt. The metadata report is included in the supplemental record. Were they received before or after your inspection? Before. Grant's attorney touched his sleeve again. He pulled away. For context, Ms. Klein received those files from an employee involved in a disagreement over how to classify a maintenance event. Cho looked down at the application. The employee whose certification Mercer Soil and Stone relies upon in Appendix C? Grant's jaw tightened. Elena performs routine field documentation. She does not make engineering or operational determinations. Yet her certification is offered as evidence that the facility has complied with its inspection plan. It establishes that inspections occurred. Not that they were accurate? Paige closed her eyes for half a second. Cho turned toward me. Ms. Mercer, would you come forward? Grant's attorney spoke before he could. We have no objection. He looked at her as if she had changed the lock on his house. I carried the yellow pad and his pen to the witness seat. My orange notebook stayed tucked beneath my arm. The clerk swore me in. Cho asked my position. Environmental field technician. Not junior assistant? A little heat climbed my neck. No. What are your qualifications? I gave her the short version. My certification, 9 years of field experience, 6 at Alder Creek, responsibility for routine inspections and event sampling. Did you take the photographs we've displayed? Yes. Did you alter their timestamps? No, the camera synchronized to GPS that morning. The synchronization status is in the metadata report. Grant's attorney wrote something on her pad. Grant stared at the screen. Cho displayed the taped alarm light. Describe this. The backup pump's fault indicator had been covered with black electrical tape. Curtis shifted in his chair behind us. Grant reached for his microphone. That tape could have been placed there at any time. Cho held up one hand. You'll have an opportunity to respond. She asked me when I discovered it. I gave her the time. She asked who was present. I named Luis and Ray. She asked when the rental pump arrived. Dispatch confirmed at 6:33. It arrived shortly after 7. The clerk projected the rental invoice. The dispatch time was printed beneath the work order number. Grant had testified the pump came after the county requested precautions. The county's first request was dated 3 days later. He tried a different route. I misspoke about the sequence, he said when Cho let him respond. The point is that we took prompt corrective action. Panel member David Rusk, a retired contractor with hands almost as scarred as Luis's, leaned into his microphone. Why call it preventive work if it was corrective? We were stabilizing an area before a breach, so there was instability, an area for improvement. Rusk looked at the photograph of the curved cracks. I've improved a few slopes in my life, usually after they moved. The room remained quiet except for the ventilation fan. Cho displayed the swale photograph. Brown water threaded around dead grass below the berm. Grant said, that could be mulch runoff from anywhere on the site. The upstream control sample did not have the same profile, I said. His head turned toward me. Cho asked, what profile? I read the ammonia, conductivity, and organic loading results from my notes. I explained that the lab report called the sample consistent with diluted leachate, but did not establish the precise source. Grant seized the distinction. So you cannot testify that the pond released leachate? No. And you cannot testify that Alder Creek was affected? No indication that it was. He relaxed slightly. I added, I can testify that the swale required investigation and that calling it ordinary mulch runoff before sampling wasn't supported. His face closed again. Cho asked about my notebook. I placed it beneath the document camera. The cover was scarred, swollen at the corners, and still stained from the rain. Under the bright lens, it looked less like evidence than what it was, a tool somebody had carried to work. I opened to November 6th. The panel followed the sequence down the page. Pond reading, pump cycle, alarm, seep, calls, sample collection, photograph numbers. Every entry had been made before Grant's revised report existed. Do you maintain these notes as part of your regular work? Cho asked. Yes. Were the relevant pages provided to the project engineer? Yes. Grant's attorney stood. The company would like the record to reflect that the notebook is company property. Cho glanced at her. Ownership isn't presently in dispute. Beside Grant, Paige made a sound like a breath, turning into a laugh and being stopped at the last possible moment. The hearing continued for another hour. Dana explained the monitoring pins and the 11mm movement. She would not call the berm breached, and she would not call it stable. The lab report remained careful. The creek had shown no detected impact. The repaired pond could be safely operated at reduced capacity if the panel required additional monitoring. Grant's answers became shorter. When he stayed with what he actually knew, financing, schedules, hauling capacity, he was persuasive. He explained why the expansion mattered and how losing the municipal contracts would affect the company. Even Rusk listened closely. Then Cho asked why the application had not been amended when the repair began. Grant looked at Paige. She did not answer for him. "We believed the work didn't materially change the proposed facility," he said. "Did anyone recommend a phased amendment?" The yellow pad lay beside my hand. I had written his answers in neat lines, each beside the time. Grant saw the page. "Yes," he said. An internal option was discussed. By whom? Elena. And why was it rejected? He could have said the lender condition. He could have described the borrowing base, the municipal advance, the grinder lease, and the gap Paige had been trying to close. Those facts would not have made his testimony true, but they would have made it human. Instead, he said, it wasn't operationally sound. Paige picked up her briefcase and set it on the floor between them. The panel deliberated in closed session that afternoon. We waited in the corridor on molded plastic chairs. Curtis left to take a call and did not come back. Dana worked through email on her phone. Paige stood at the end of the hallway looking through a narrow window at the parking lot. Grant sat beside me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You enjoyed that." I looked at the yellow pad on my lap. "Which part?" "Watching them question me. I kept hoping you'd stop." "Stop what?" "Making it worse." He rubbed his thumb across the indentation his wedding ring had left in his other hand. He had moved the ring while testifying and hadn't put it back. "I was trying to save the company. You were trying to be the man who saved it." He looked at me then. "That distinction matters to you because you've never been responsible for everyone. No, it matters because everyone else pays when you need the story to have one hero." The hearing room doors opened before he could answer. The panel did not issue the final ruling that day. Cho announced that the record would remain open for 7 days for a revised repair schedule, financial assurance for monitoring, and a phased operating proposal. The expansion application, as submitted, would not be approved. Grant walked out before the clerk finished collecting exhibits. The written ruling arrived 12 days later. It denied the immediate 12-acre expansion, but allowed Mercer Soil and Stone to submit a phased amendment after the berm repair passed independent review. The company had to operate the east pond at reduced capacity, install automated level alarms, and fund 2 years of third-party monitoring. On page 14, the panel found that Grant's testimony concerning the timing of the instability, rental pumping, and field evidence was contradicted by contemporaneous records. On page 15, it cited my field photographs by number, 17, 21, 24, 32. The photos I had been told were dramatic became the panel's clearest evidence of what the site looked like before it was altered. The lender froze the original credit line. Paige spent 9 days negotiating a smaller facility loan secured against the first municipal contract. We sold the South grinder and leased one during peak processing weeks. For 6 weeks, overtime disappeared. 2 equipment replacements were postponed. Nobody lost a regular shift. Grant helped close the smaller loan. He was good at it. That made what came next harder for my mother, not easier. Diane called us into the farmhouse conference room after the ruling. She placed 3 documents on the table: the panel decision, a new reporting structure, and my performance warning. She tore the warning in half. Then she looked at Grant. "Environmental staff report outside operations from now on. Paige controls the contract. Dana approves the scope. You don't edit inspection records." Grant read the new structure. "You're stripping my authority based on 1 hearing." "I'm stripping the authority you used badly. I kept this company alive. You helped keep it alive." His eyes moved to Paige. She had left her wedding ring at home. "I'm moving into the apartment over the Dayton office," she said. "For now." Grant went very still. "Is this business or marriage?" "I don't know yet," she said. "That's why I need you to stop making me answer both questions at once." He folded the reporting structure and put it in his jacket. 2 weeks later, he accepted a reduced role focused on financing and fleet contracts. 3 months after that, he left Mercer Soil and Stone for another turnaround job. Paige never told me whether he left the company before she ended the marriage or after. Some sequences belong to the people living them. My mother offered me the new compliance manager position. The salary was more than I had ever made. The office had a door, a working heater, and access to a pickup that did not require binder clips. I turned it down. Diane stared at me across her desk. "You fought this hard for the work." "I fought to be able to do the work. That's different from staying." "You're punishing me. I'm leaving before I start." Her face changed. I reached across the desk and took her hand. We sat that way until the radiator clanked in the wall. Dana introduced me to 2 field inspectors forming a small employee-owned cooperative. I bought in with savings, a used camera, and more optimism than our accountant recommended. We inspected transfer stations, compost yards, quarries, and one mushroom facility whose owner insisted the smell was therapeutic. 8 months after the hearing, Mercer Soil and Stone's phased permit was approved. The East Berm had passed 2 wet seasons of monitoring. The automated alarms worked. The first expansion pad was operating below its permitted limit, and Paige had kept all 46 regular positions. She called me on a cold Monday and asked my cooperative to bid on the independent inspections. "We won't be the cheapest," I said. "I was hoping you'd say that." We negotiated the scope for 3 days. She tried to remove one quarterly visit. I put it back. She cut the travel rate. I added a weather event minimum. When we finally agreed, neither of us apologized. On my first morning back at Alder Creek, Paige met me at the gate. The rebuilt berm rose behind her, seeded with winter rye. Luis drove past in a loader and saluted with his thermos. Paige handed me the signed contract. Then she gave me a fresh orange waterproof notebook. Inside the cover, my father's sentence was written in her slanting hand. "Write what the ground says." Below it, she had added another line, "and make us listen." I clipped my blue grease pencil to the cover, tucked the notebook under my arm, and walked with my sister toward the pond.